guys, so in this lesson we're going to be discussing a few really nice jazz chord voicings you can use that are really quite similar to one another, and they're called four-way close, locked hands, and drop two chord voicings. Now, these are all ways of harmonizing the melody with block chords so that every single note in the melody becomes a chord. Alright, so let's begin. Now, the most basic and strongest possible sounding chord progression that you can ever create is a 5-1, a dominant chord going to its tonic. In this case, a G7 going to a C major. Now, a really common chord substitution for the dominant chord is a diminished chord a semitone higher. So the G7 could become an A flat diminished. And in effect what you're doing there is playing a G7 flat 9 but a rootless G7 flat 9. And that's why that chord substitution works. But anyway, it's a widely used chord substitution over a dominant chord. Now, A flat diminished, which again is basically your G7 chord, has the notes A flat, B, D, F. And the tonic chord, that is a C6 for example, has the notes C, E, G, A. Now, something really interesting happens when you superimpose an A flat diminished over a C6. Now notice that those two chords don't share any of the same notes. So then if we take the notes from both of those chords, the A flat diminished and the C6, and we turn all of those notes into a scale, we get C, D, E, F, G, A flat, A, B, then back to C. So we effectively have the C major scale with an A flat added on top, which incidentally is the C Bebop Scale. Now, because these two chords don't share any notes, and each of the notes in those two chords effectively spell out your C major scale, just with the A flat, you can now do something really cool with this. If you alternate between these chords, so play C6 A flat diminished, C6 A flat diminished, and so on, and change inversions so that you're slowly going up, you can create a little run like this. Right, so I was literally just alternating between C6 in root position to A flat diminished, C6 in first inversion to A flat diminished, C6 in second inversion to A flat diminished, C6 in third inversion to A flat diminished, then back to C6 in root position. So that sounds really smooth and really harmonically strong, because effectively all you're doing is creating a 5-1, 5-1, 5-1 and so on chord progression, while the top note, the melody note, the soprano, just runs up a scale. Now you can do the same thing with a C minor 6 chord and the A flat diminished. Or the C7. Or the C minor 7. But it doesn't work as well for a C major 7 because the C major 7 has the note B and the A flat diminished has the note B. So because that note doubles, you can't get quite a smooth transition from one chord to the other. Now, this way of playing is known as a four-way close. You're playing all the notes of a four-note chord in closed harmony, that is, as close together as you can, all within the range of an octave. Now, this is a great technique to employ when you've got a song where the melody moves up and down in steps, where you have a stepwise melody. For example, Blue Bossa. There Will Never Be Another You. Or Fly Me to the Moon. So that sounded really smooth and really nice, and all I was doing was using that four-way close voicing to create a 5-1, 5-1 chord progression with the melody note on top. And the reason it works well in this particular case is because the melody goes up and down in steps. It sort of follows a little scale. So, and here it jumps, so you sort of skip the 5 and just go to the next inversion of the D minor 7. And I'm anticipating the chord change, so the next chord, by playing its related dominant chord on beat 4 of the preceding bar. So for example, Fly Me to the Moon starts on A minor 7 and goes to D minor 7. So just before I go to D minor 7, I'm going to play the A7, which is the 5th of D minor 7, but obviously the diminished substitute version. So I go A minor 7, in effect E7, A minor 7. Now I don't go back to E7, instead I go to A7. So I'm anticipating the next chord by playing its dominant, and then I hit D minor 7 there. Now if that was a little bit confusing or convoluted or difficult to follow, it's all up here in the picture-in-picture, so if you pause it and have a look at it, you'll get what I'm getting at, essentially. Now this technique can be modified in a couple of ways to get 2 other widely used techniques. Now if we play the exact same thing with the right hand, so play in 4-way close, but we double the top melody note with our left hand an octave lower, then we have a technique called locked hands. And that sounds like this. So that sounds really nice, and it just adds an extra layer of harmonic complexity to your sort of 4-way close. But really, it's still just the 5-1-5-1 progression. You've just doubled the melody note an octave lower. Now the second technique is as follows. If you play the exact same thing with your right hand, so the 4-way close, but you omit the second highest note of every single chord, and you play that omitted note an octave lower with your left hand, then that's called a drop 2 voicing. And that sounds like this. Right, so I played the exact same thing, but I omitted the second highest note and played it down here. So and so on. And this is called drop 2 because you're literally dropping the second note from the top an octave lower. And you're doing this regardless of what degree that actual note is. So for example, in root position, you drop the 5th, whereas in second inversion, you drop the root. Drop 2 literally means you drop the second highest note down an octave, regardless of what that second highest note is. Now there are also drop 3 voicings and drop 4 voicings and drop 2 and 3 voicings, which follow the exact same logic, but drop 2 is by far the most widely used one in sort of jazz piano. And of course, you can use this drop 2 voicing in any context wherever there's a run of chords. It doesn't have to be the 5-1-5-1 progression I showed you. It can be any sort of run of chords. You can just drop down the second highest note and you get a drop 2 voicing. For example, the song Don't Get Around Much Anymore. So that song has a nice little run of chords there. So what I did was just take the second highest note, which happens to be the 5th because they're all in root position, and drop it down an octave. And hopefully you can hear it gives a much nicer and smoother and much more balanced harmony when you play a drop 2 voicing. So for example, compare this with this. agree that that sounds sort of a bit more balanced and a bit sort of harmonically more interesting. So otherwise, that covers off on four-way close, locked hands, which is also called shearing voicings, and drop two voicings. So whenever you come across a song that has a stepwise melody, or a melody that goes up and down in steps, try throwing in one of these voicings and see how much more sort of sophisticated and harmonically interesting your song can become. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys. As always, feel free to leave any comments or questions. See ya!